Welcome to Airplay Escape. Please consider subscribing to my Patreon account for the full audiobook. Thank you for your support. Hogwarts, Joestar's Wild Journey to Become the Wizarding World's Strongest. Episode 31. Brother, you are so miserable. Harry and Ron's sighs in unison made Joshua even more embarrassed. Didn't I come? Don't care about so many details. Joshua quickly coughed. Can't leave a funny image in front of the protagonist, right? How to mix after that? Oh my god, who did Harry find in his little circle again? A group of 3 came behind Joshua, and the blonde boy standing in the center was the one who spoke, slowly swallowing and dragging his long cavity, which was annoying to hear. He seems to be. Didn't get on the train? The pudgy boy to his left snickered. The pudgy boy on the other side also laughed exaggeratedly, and to be honest, if it weren't for the ugly chicness of the two of them, Joshua would have really thought that these were twin brothers. Boy, look at you, muggle. Although the blonde little white face is not bad, this condescending attitude completely lowers his impression. This is really. Harry. You first found a pure-blood wizarding world disgrace, and now you want to find a muggle child? I don't think this kind of small circle will help you. You. Ron seemed to be very grumpy, and then stretched out his hand and pointed at the blonde boy in front of him. Malfoy, I put up with you for a long time, I see that you lack the slap of capitalist love. Malfoy, the blonde young man, smiled contemptuously. Oh? Is it? His 2 henchmen also began to giggle, seemingly one named Goyle and the other called Crabbe, whose role was to support Malfoy and act as an errand runner. Joshua secretly grabbed Ron and shook his head at Harry. He was about to pull out his wand just now. Mr. Malfoy, huh? Joshua felt that this was a good opportunity to pretend to be forced, and such an innocent and cute little villain was sent to the door, which was forced to pretend to be unreasonable. Malfoy unconsciously took a step back, and the smile of the man in front of him actually made his heart a little hairy inexplicably. Probably a hallucination caused by hunger? How could this kid be a muggle? How could he make his noble self flinch? Humph. What do you want? Malfoy took a step forward, as if it would make him a little more imposing. Nothing, I just think it's weird. Joshua learned Malfoy's annoying tone, deliberately lengthening his words. Why are you okay with a good look, but your personality and tutor are so bad? Noble purebloods? But it's really a pathetic boring self-comfort. You can spend your life with such thoughts, silly child. Compared to Mr. Weasley's family, I think they are much more noble than people like you. Joshua's afterglow caught a glimpse of Ron beside him, and his ears turned red at this point. Ding dong, system tip, the host gets Ron's favorability rating of 10, by the way. If the favorability breaks through the sky, you can do some wonderful and shameful things. The system June came out to be a demon again, but Joshua was too lazy to pay attention to it, and continued to say to Malfoy, your behavior will only be disgusting. If you insist on showing off your 2 stupid followers in front of us, then I will only be civilized monkeys. By the way, compared to the 2 of them, I think it is more valuable to be able to make friends with each other. Harry suddenly blessed his heart, and stepped forward to give Joshua a strong momentum. Joshua is right. Ron watched the movements of the 2 people beside him, stunned for half a second, and then said to Malfoy, both of them are right. You. After all, Malfoy was still a child. Where could he stand this kind of anger? He couldn't stand it at that time, and his face turned pig liver color, not much worse than Ron just now. Joshua took another step forward. How? Isn't it angry? Then you have the ability to hit me, sand sculpture. Not only did he taunt Malfoy, but he deliberately gave up his chest, as if they would suffer if they didn't hit themselves. Malfoy's brain rushed a little indifferently, staring straight at Joshua with his eyes hooked, and then throwing a punch. Whoosh! A punch was exchanged for a scream. Joshua! Harry and Ron hurried over. Malfoy! You actually dare to hit someone? Ron was so angry that he didn't know what to say. His friend who had just known for a while was beaten in front of him. Is this bearable? He stepped forward and glared at the 3 people opposite with fierce eyes. I'll tell Percy. Let him deduct your points. Peace of mind. Rest assured, Ron. Joshua grabbed Ron and soothed him in his ear. I'm okay. How is this possible? He's all hit you in the chest. Harry clenched his wand and blocked it in front of Joshua. If Malfoy and they really dared to rush forward, then stick their wands into their nostrils. Joshua had to grab his 2 angry companions and tell them to look back at themselves. But you see, it's obviously him who shouted, I feel really okay. Harry and Ron realized that it seemed that the person who cried out in pain was indeed Malfoy. He was clutching his reddened fist and wanted to cry without tears. Episode 32. Damn. What kind of mean thing do? Malfoy managed to stand with the support of his 2 followers, and the punch that had just hit Joshua's chest was almost like hitting an iron plate. Who knows? Joshua reached out and scratched his nose, almost unable to hold back just now. it would not be fun if his finger slipped into some unspeakable hole. By this time, most of the young wizards had already boarded the ship, and Hagrid began to shout for those who were not following behind. Malfoy rubbed his fists and said viciously to his two followers, "Let's go. I wrote down this feud. You mud. Good, good. Mudblood, mudblood. I know what you're going to say, noble Lord Malfoy, but I hope you won't be so embarrassed the next time you say that." Joshua's nonchalant look stabbed a large hole in the heart of the young Malfoy classmate. And until the three of them got on the boat together, Ron was still relishing Malfoy's decline just now. I really have a hard time believing that it's Malfoy. The eldest young master of the Malfoy family with a high toe. Oh, and the way he left was really... It's hilarious, but... Ron suddenly became cautious. "Joshua, just in case I still have to ask. That mudblood. Do you really know what it means?" Joshua leaned against the side of the boat, enjoying the evening breeze blowing in front of him. Hearing Ron's words, he subconsciously turned around. "Huh? Of course I know. But..." Ron opened his mouth wide, his expression startled enough to shove an entire fist into his mouth. "Then you also..." "Stop. Stop. I'm sorry to interrupt your conversation, but... Mudblood means a few things, how can I not understand?" Harry was probably the most confused of the trio. Ron knew more than he did, but why did Muggle-born Joshua know something weird? Ron's face was gloomy, and he slammed his fist on the side of the boat. "You don't think that's a good synonym, Harry? Mudblood. The contemptuous name of the noble bloodline family for the inferior. Take a chestnut, it's like someone calling them contemptuously in front of the big black brothers. Black slaves the same." Joshua smiled slightly, which puzzled Ron and Harry even more. "Then why aren't you angry?" Harry felt that there must be something wrong in this, either his own brain case was broken or Joshua's brain case was broken. This. Joshua stretched out his hand to the sky, as if he was going to go to the moon in 9 days, "A man I respect." He was humiliated in front of his face and looked unmoved, and he could even laugh and continue to brag and fart with his friends. "Oh, by the way, Ron, that gentleman is redhead, just like you." Of course, leaving aside the issue of happy chests. Joshua scratched his head, his expression a little tangled. How to say? After all, I am an Oriental, and there is still a lot of gap between some concepts and Orthodox Chinese. The pure blood theory he espoused is actually worth nothing to me. Although I consider myself a gentleman of my Joestar family, after all, he has not touched my reverse scales. Big Joe shed sad tears. "A rocky, old thief. What about the gentlemen of my Chow family? How come the descendants are either second-rate or ruffian juvenile delinquents and little underworlds? That. What if he did?" Joshua snorted coldly, turned back to the two and showed a cold smile. "If he dares to show half a point of disrespect to my relatives and friends and my ancestors. I dug his ancestral grave. Blew up his house. Stolen all the property in his Gringotts. Fiercely smack old phlegm in his father's face. Let him have a good taste of what it means to be the pain of the Malfoys' possible extermination." Harry and Ron swallowed in unison, seemingly. This new friend. It's not easy to mess with. Good. The system said that the host is quite in place, and it is almost possible to compete for the Hollywood actor. Get out. There is something to say, and fart. If you don't force things, don't blindly come out, weird and scary. Joshua rarely broke out of the aura of pretense, and the system was also honestly subdued, taking advantage of Harry and Ron to ask the sky speechlessly, in view of the fact that the host is very pretentious, so this system decides what to decide. If you have a reward, you can quickly take it out. This system decided to give the host a chance. If the host can pretend to be forced again in front of the teachers and students of the whole school, and pretend to be a great force, then it will give you benefits. How about randomly drawing a skill again? With skills, you can ensure that you can achieve all the awesome you blow out. Episode 33. The fleet sailed quietly across the lake, only rippling in layers of ripples. Occasionally, the little wizard cried out in surprise, and most of them were gagged by their companions on their boats, for fear that his loud noise would attract the hidden monsters in the lake. Ron was the kind of little wizard who almost cried out, and it was hard to imagine that he was obviously a pure-blood wizard who was more surprised by this majestic Hogwarts castle than Harry and Joshua. The fleet seemed to come under the castle along a dark tunnel, and finally reached a place resembling an underground pier, and then climbed up to a gravel and small pebbled ground. The young wizards disembarked from the ship in order, waiting for Hagrid to count the numbers and lead them to the next location. They then climbed a tunnel in the rocks under the light of Hagrid's lantern until they finally reached a flat, damp meadow in the shadow of the castle. Everyone climbed a series of stone steps and gathered in front of a huge oak door. "Are they all there? Have you brought all your belongings? Young man, you haven't lost your toad, have you?" After seeing a little fat wizard with a red face nodding, Hagrid raised a huge fist and slammed 3 times on the castle gate. The gate immediately opened. A tall, dark-haired witch in an emerald green robe stood in front of the gate. This is Professor McGonagall, who brought Joshua to Hogwarts. Perhaps others might have been taken by Professor McGonagall's serious expression at this time, but Joshua thought more. Well, it appears immediately after knocking. It creates a sense of depression on top of the psyche, and the serious expression coupled with the condescending position easily allows her to gain a first-hand advantage in communication with students. But in order to pretend to be forced to look like you have been waiting behind the gate, right? What if Hagrid leads the wrong way? In the end, Joshua came to the conclusion that being a teacher is really hard. Professor McGonagall reached out and tapped the door with her wand, and then the oak door was pulled wide open by the power of magic. Some of the ignorant Muggle wizards began to exclaim again. The foyer resembles Gringotts, surrounded by flaming torches around the stone walls. The ceiling is so high that you can barely see the top. On the facade is a luxurious marble staircase that leads upstairs. They followed Professor McGonagall along the stone floor. Joshua heard the buzzing of hundreds of people in the door on the right, and the rest of the school must have arrived. Professor McGonagall ushered the first-year students into a small, empty room at the other end of the hall. Everyone rushed in, rubbing shoulders and huddling together, nervously and carefully gazing at everything around them. Joshua looked around, and there were hundreds of first-year students alone. He remembered the task given to him by the system just now, pretending to be forced in front of the whole school. Grade 7 is counted as about 100 students per grade. 700 teachers and students in the school? Pretending in front of so many people? This seems very difficult. Bug. Rowling has a big bug again. I wrote this only to find out that the number of people at Hogwarts was very problematic. There are 2 results found from the internet. One is a first-year flying lesson. The 2 colleges take classes together, but there are only more than 20 brooms on the ground. According to this calculation, the whole school has a total of about 280 people, but this is too different from some plots in the movie and the novel. After all, the long table will not be for 70 people to sit. Another version is that there are about 700 people in the school, and I personally prefer this statement. After all, it is impossible for the magic world and the whole country to have such a small source of students. HP3 mentioned a Quidditch game. 3/4 of the students in the school support Gryffindor, and there are less than 200 people who support Slytherin. According to this calculation, there are about 700-800 people, but there are only a few teachers with names and surnames in the whole school, and 700 people in 7 grades have to be exhausted. Leave him alone, just come with about 700 people. Welcome to Hogwarts, Professor McGonagall said. The opening banquet is about to begin, but before you go to the cafeteria, you must first determine which house you are each into. Sorting is an important ritual, because the house is like your home at Hogwarts while you are in school. You will attend classes with the rest of the house, live together in the dormitories of the college, and spend your free time together in the common room of the college. Pull it down. Joshua whispered to the 2 around him, treating school as my home is the funniest joke I've ever heard, and there isn't one. I believe she's a ghost. The vice principal is very bad. The names of the 4 houses are Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin. Each academy has its own glorious history and has produced outstanding wizards and wizards. During your time at Hogwarts, your outstanding performance will earn extra points for your house, while any violations will deduct points from your house. At the end of the year, the house with the highest score receives the House Cup, which is a high honor. I hope that no matter which college you are assigned to, you will be able to honor your own college. In a few minutes, the sorting ceremony will be held in front of the whole school. I suggest you put yourself in order and refresh yourself while you wait. Episode 34. Thanks to the big guy Long Yuxuan for the tip. Let's post one more episode. Professor McGonagall left the room and said that she was going to prepare, but in fact, it was not to find a stool, take out the ugly hat that was old and bursting, listen to it sing a song, and then put it on the person's head, and explain it together to put you in a certain college. How can they assign us exactly which house we go to? Harry is a little uncomfortable with this stressful environment and is always chilling when faced with the unknown. Ron seemed to be more nervous than Harry, and he subconsciously began to stand still to relieve the pressure in his heart. I don't know, before I asked my brother. Fred always told me it was a test. Looks like it will hurt us a lot. Although I think that's a joke, but what if it's not a joke? Ron did not deliberately suppress his voice, which led to many people hearing their conversation. Joshua looked around, and it seemed that almost everyone except Malfoy's small circle was at risk. It seems that the sorting ceremony is like how the child was born, and it is hidden by unscrupulous adult wizards through various methods. At least Joshua saw some wavy little brown-haired loli nervously reciting something. Listen to me. Joshua felt that it was time to brush up on his favorability among first-year students, so he raised his voice slightly. The sorting ceremony is actually not that difficult. You just have to do the simplest thing, to know which house you'll be assigned to. The people around Joshua were shocked. Did this little brother of the yellow race, who looked a little handsome, know this kind of thing? May I ask you a question? How did you know about this? Little Lori, who had just been reciting a spell, squeezed past the little wizards, staring at Joshua with wide eyes full of suspicion. I bought everything we needed for our age from Lycan Bookstore: History of Modern Magic, The Rise and Fall of Dark Magic, Important Magical Events of the 20th Century, including the history of Hogwarts. But there is only a vague description of the sorting on the above, and it does not carefully indicate how to divide the houses. To be honest, there is obviously not much difference in age, but I still prefer little Hermione in front of her to Ginny Joshua. So Joshua made his posture more adequate. Rest assured, cute little girl, do you think that the best magic schools in the whole country and even the world will be allowed to use that kind of selection method that causes harm to students? Of course I thought of it, but some books. Oh no, miss, there is an old saying in our huaxia that it is better to write a letter than to have no book. Things in books can't always be right. That question aside, I can assert that the next sorting ceremony will definitely not be difficult, at least not to test your and my level of magical knowledge, otherwise it will be unfair to the young muggle-born wizards. Of course, there will be no danger, otherwise do you think that such a rich family will be as easy as it is now? Joshua pointed his finger at Malfoy's pure-blood noble clique, drawing the collective glare of the future little Slytherins. TSK. I think Joshua had a much better attitude when he explained to Hermione than when he spoke to us. Ron's tone was a little sour, but it was also met with Harry's nod of approval. That's it. Hermione glanced at Joshua, as if to memorize him in the deepest part of her mind, then silently took a step back and continued to recite the mantra she had learned. At this time, a strange thing happened, and several people screamed loudly behind Joshua. 20 ghosts suddenly popped up from the wall behind them. These pearl-white, translucent ghosts glided across the room, exchanging ears, paying little attention to these first graders. A few of the bolder students talked to the ghosts, and it seemed that these creatures in the realm of death looked quite kind. Professor McGonagall is back. The ghosts fluttered through the opposite wall and disappeared. Now, line up and follow me. Joshua shrugged his shoulders and raised his chin at the two beside him, letting them go first, with Joshua following Ron. They walked out of the room, through the foyer, and through a double door at the back to enter the luxurious dining room. The rest of the academy's classes were already seated around 4 long tables, above which thousands of candles fluttered in the air illuminated the dining room. 4 tables are lined with glittering gold plates and goblets. On the top of the cafeteria is another long table, which is the seat of the teachers. Professor McGonagall brought the first-year students over there and lined them up in front of all the senior students, with the teachers behind them. Such a position is really a bit dramatic, and it can't help but remind Joshua of the whole school chorus he experienced in his previous life. Episode 35. The little wizard stood in the very center of the cafeteria, and the eyes of the entire school converged on them. Some of the little wizards who couldn't bear such a heavy burden really didn't want to be too nervous, so they had to raise their heads and look up at the ceiling. But the ceiling above only saw a little starlight flashing on the velvety black ceiling, and with the little wizard's eyes and godless looks, there was really a feeling of looking up at the starry sky. Hermione resolutely told the stories of the ceiling to the people around her. Spells have been cast here, and they look like the sky outside. I read about it in Hogwarts, a history of the school, but no one cared about her. Professor McGonagall gently placed a 4-legged stool in front of the first-year students, and then placed a wizard hat on the stool. The hat was patched, worn and dirty. Attention, that's the sorting hat, which determines which academy we will go to. Joshua succeeded in silencing the somewhat chattering Hermione, and now all the students and teachers turned their attention to the hat. Then, the hat twisted. The brim of the hat cracked a wide seam, like a mouth. The hat began to sing. You may think I'm not pretty, but don't take people by looks. If you can find a more beautiful hat than me, I can eat myself. You can make your bowler hat black and shiny, make your tall silk hat smooth and structured. I'm a magic hat for the Hogwarts test. Nature is taller than your hat. Any thought hidden in your heads can't hide from the golden eyes of the magic hat. Put it on and try it. I'll tell you which college you should be assigned to. You may belong to Gryffindor, where there is bravery buried deep in your heart. Their boldness made Gryffindor outstanding. You may belong to Hufflepuff, where people are upright and loyal. Hufflepuff students are stoic and honest, not afraid of hard work. If you're smart-witted, you might get into the wise old Ravenclaw. Those who are wise and learned will always meet their fellow travelers there. Maybe you'll get into Svetling, maybe you'll make sincere friends here, but those who are cunning and sinister will stop at nothing to achieve their goals. Come and put on me. Don't be afraid. Don't panic. In my hands, even though I don't even have a hand, you are absolutely safe, because I'm a thinking magic hat. After the guest speeches, the host spoke. Joshua silently thought in his heart, it seems that this kind of formalism is inevitable in any country. Professor McGonagall took a few steps forward, a roll of parchment in her hand. Whoever I call by name now, I put on my hat, sit on a stool, and wait for the sorting house," she said. Hannah Abbott, a ruddy-faced little girl with 2 blonde hair braids, stumbled out of the queue and put on a hat that just covered her eyes. She sat down. A pause. Hufflepuff, the hat shouted. The people at the table on the right applauded and cheered Hannah and welcomed her to their seat. "This is the sorting ceremony? I think it's so easy to burst. When I'm all right, I'll have to teach Fred a good lesson." Joshua smiled slightly, ignored Ron, who was broken thoughts, and silently recited the system in his heart. System: when the hospital is sorted for a while. No rolling. The system: June, who has been snubbed for a long time, is very cold. Fuck, I mean you won't be observed by the sorting hat when you're sorting for a while, right? Why are you so excited? Joshua watched the little wizards in front of him walk towards Professor McGonagall one by one, and it seemed that he should be placed in the last sorting house. The system impatiently replied to Joshua, "What do you think the system sent you the Dementor forgiveness for?" "It's for now, you mean?" Quite simply, a very profound magic is applied inside that hat, which can detect some of the innermost thoughts and ways of thinking of the person who is worn, and then use the sorting procedure instilled in it by the 4 founders of Hogwarts, combined with the results of the sorting house for more than 1,000 years, through the method of big data analysis to determine which house a person is suitable to be sorted in. Joshua frowned. "But I'm different from the others, I'm a traverser. So it is possible that this broken hat will be discovered. How? This system is awesome, right?" Joshua hurriedly clicked on the system interface, and as soon as he clicked on the Dementor immunity, he heard Professor McGonagall shouting to herself, "Joshua Joestar, Episode 36, Joshua Joestar." Professor McGonagall's voice echoed in the dining room. Although the dining hall at Hogwarts also doubles as an auditorium, it's still a lot of drama to think about. Putting these unrealistic thoughts behind him, Joshua turned his attention and walked slowly to the 3-legged stool in front of him, where Professor McGonagall was waiting for him with the dirty, torn sorting hat. "Hello, Professor McGonagall, we meet again. Maybe I will be a student under your academy in the future." Professor McGonagall ignored Joshua, put her hat on his head with self-concern, and whispered to him, "Remember. Have no distractions, have a good conversation with the sorting hat." The hat was still a little bigger for Joshua, and only a part of the students of the 4 houses below could be seen above his head. 3 of the houses all looked at Joshua with eager eyes, as if expecting the sorting hat to give this last little wizard to their house. This is especially true of Gryffindor, because the Weasleys have a lot of high impressions for Joshua, and as for the Slytherins, Malfoy seemed to have spread the news that Joshua was from a Muggle family, so basically the students there looked at him with either indifference or nonchalance. "Oh, interesting. Little guy. Happy birthday. The hat talks." Joshua wanted to shout like this, but think about it, otherwise he is likely to be taken as a fool. "I've been created by Godric Gryffindor, infused with the minds of several other founders, and have had self-awareness as a sorting tool at Hogwarts for more than 1,000 years. You seem to be the first little wizard who almost didn't go to school because you didn't get on the bus." The hat was quite disgusting, showing off his long history to himself, and then hitting Joshua very stiffly. "So Mr. Hat, I know that my deeds are stupid enough, can you stop revealing my scars? Shall we start sorting hospitals?" The sorting hat twisted on top of Joshua's head, seemingly adjusting to a more comfortable position. "That's of course, kid. Oh, first we use elimination. I'm sorry, but while I can see your ambitions and pursuits, the dream of becoming the apex of a wizard is something that no one dares to do. You also seem to have a ruthless consciousness, but..." Joshua raised his eyebrows. "I'm a Muggle, not for Slytherin, am I?" The sorting hat said with a smile, Although you may be a better fit for Slytherin in terms of personality, I really regret that I cannot go against Mr. Salazar's will. Let's talk about Ravenclaw. To achieve the strongest name in the wizarding world, you must have a corresponding wealth of knowledge. Maybe you need to study in the ocean of knowledge, but... Child, the importance that the hardworking students in Ravenclaw attach to learning. The meaning is already obvious, to the effect that you are a scumbag who does not have the motivation of other people's top students, and putting you in Ravenclaw may also make the children who want to learn become lazy. So in fact, the reason for the classification of those key classes and rocket classes in middle school is actually this. In other words, there are only 2 choices left for me now. Hufflepuff and Gryffindor? So the recommendation you gave me is... Let's meditate together in our hearts. Hufflepuff Gryffindor, sleeping? Joshua jumped up directly from the stool in shock. What the hell? The teachers and students of the whole school looked at the little wizard in front of them in horror, and Professor McGonagall, who was standing behind Joshua, also became overwhelmed. Even if this little guy didn't get on the train, how can he even make a little moth for the sorting ceremony now? "Joshua? Is there something going on?" Professor McGonagall hurriedly asked out loud, lest there be any big mess. No, Professor. Joshua quickly sat down. Fortunately the sorting hat had just followed his advice and did not directly call out Hufflepuff, otherwise he would have to go to Hufflepuff to be an honest man. It's not that Hufflepuff is bad, it's just that you look at how the Sorting Hat says Hufflepuffs. You may belong to Hufflepuff, where people are upright and loyal, and Hufflepuff students are stoic and honest, unafraid of hard labor. Honesty is enough. Honest Joshua thinks that he can barely get aside, but the back is not afraid of hard labor. Forget it, lazy cancer patients can't afford to hurt. And looking at most HP fanfiction, there are basically few books about the protagonist entering Hufflepuff. After watching the full series of HP, Hufflepuff famous alumnus Joshua only remembers Hannah Abbott, the first beautiful girl in the branch, was Hufflepuff's, and finally inserted in the pile of cow dung in Longbottom, and then it's the dead old and miserable Cedric brother, almost the whole time in the Goblet of Fire. Let's say there is something outstanding. But I can't remember it, it has the unpretentious characteristics of Hufflepuff's. And finally? Following Harry to touch the fake and shoddy Goblet of Fire of the Raushi, Bayou teleported to the final boss, and then Bayou ate a shot of Avada and hung up. So Hufflepuff is a great deal for Joshua, who aspires to be the protagonist. Episode 37, So, Mr. Sorting Hat, can you tell me why you sorted me to Hufflepuff? Joshua narrowed his eyes and smashed his most sinister-sounding voice to communicate with the consciousness of the Sorting Hat. Ma, don't resist the child, some of the decisions I made will sound ridiculous to most people, but time will prove it for me after all. But you still have misjudgments. Especially if there are multiple qualities in someone. Joshua remembered Harry, as a boy who hosted part of Voldemort's soul in his body, he also had some of Voldemort's abilities, such as Parseltongue. There was something brought by Voldemort's soul fragment that made Harry almost sorted into Slytherin when he was sorted. How does it feel like Virus in League of Legends? The Sorting Hat didn't know what Joshua was thinking, and the Dementor waiver accurately protected some of Joshua's memories. What you said has some truth, for example, Minerva McGonagall and Philip Pius Flitwick behind you. I used to think about putting them in opposite houses, let Minerva go to Ravenclaw, let Felius go to Gryffindor. But they insisted on going to the college they wanted to go to, and the result was their achievements are quite good. Isn't that it? I think I should go to Gryffindor. Reason, child. The Sorting Hat was silent for a moment, but still relaxed. Joshua was also silent, a little worried that he couldn't say it clearly. If you can, it's not bad to enter Ravenclaw or Slytherin, after all, there is less intersection with Harry there, and there is less attention from the upper bosses. It really works a lot for a person who likes to develop obscenely. But again, Hogwarts is also a small society. If the country is used as a metaphor for this school, then the four houses are undoubtedly four parties with different political views, and the current head of state is from the Gryffindor party. The passionate and brave Gryffindor, the loyal and simple Hufflepuff, the studious Ravenclaw, and the shrewd and cunning Slytherin. If Joshua wanted to climb the ladder and become a human being, it would undoubtedly be more advantageous to become a Gryffindor. The reason is simple, climb the thighs of the big guys and make the appearance of political correctness. Admittedly, Joshua could choose not to be a Gryffindor, and with the generosity of Old Dang, he definitely did not care what house a minor wizard had chosen. But what if this little wizard is eager to make trouble? Do you think Old Dang will once again let a non-Gryffindor student do whatever he wants? Besides, with the good relationship he has built with the Weasleys now, if he doesn't go to Gryffindor to ask for a hood, isn't that a bubble in his head? Only when you know more people can you do things, and only then can you talk about people's feelings. However, none of the above reasons can appear on the answer sheet. So Joshua thought deeply and said, Red, I like red. I'm Chinese so I like Gryffindor red, okay? The Sorting Hat didn't know what to say for a while, and for the first time in all the years that he had been in charge of the sorting house, he had seen someone who wanted to go to an academy for such a strange reason. Your reason is very clear. The Sorting Hat gave Joshua a more pertinent answer, but I can't just put you in Gryffindor so perfunctorily. I'm sorry I looked at part of your memory, but I concluded from it that you look fit to be a Hufflepuff. Of course, the reason will not seem like you are better suited to use badgers as a pattern on your chest. But how to say it? Ben Hat thinks you might. It's a salted fish. Nope. I didn't. I'm not. Joshua was anxious, stood up and shouted, once again attracting the attention of the teachers and students of the school. Oh. Kid, take it easy. I think. Mr. Joestar. What the hell are you trying to do? Professor McGonagall, as if angry, scolded behind Joshua. The students sitting below also began to talk, discussing that it might not be a good thing for such a freak to come in as if they were from their own academy. Only the Gryffindor side was better, and the discussion was a little quieter. It seems that this is the only way to do this. Joshua kicked open the three-legged stool under his butt, grabbed the sorting hat above his head and turned the brim, and shouted to all the Hogwarts students who were dumbfounded, I Joshua Joestar have a dream that I think is right. That is to be the strongest. Stand at the apex of the wizarding world. Even Merlin will bow to me when he is reborn, so here I am. Arrived at this prestigious Hogwarts. But what do I see again? Lower students do not want to advance, and older students only take exams. I was born to get to the roots. Fight hard for the mystery of magic. Desperate to march toward the truth, now. Dumbledore is dying of old age, Voldemort is half dead, these are the worst times and the best of times. This is also our time, and the world is about to enter a new era. Not being able to dream, not being able to look to the future, that's the wrong world. I don't have the conceit to think that everything about me is right, but no one can make me throw in the towel as I progress towards my dreams. Episode 38, Slytherin, laugh at me out loud. If one day I get away with surviving and stand at a height that you will not be able to look up to in this life, then I hope you will remember the joy I brought you today. Ravenclaw, you don't have to take my to heart. Knowledge may be more important to you, but in your lazy ocean of knowledge, it is absolutely impossible to give birth to a truly strong person. Hufflepuff, watch me quietly, your honesty and loyalty were once the noble qualities I expected, but I was doomed to forget about it. Gryffindor. The college I chose, whether you think I'm a megalomaniac, or you think I'm just a whim, but I'm fearless for this insignificant dream. His sorting hat. I'm going to Gryffindor. After his speech in one breath, Joshua threw his sorting hat onto the three-legged stool. He showed a knowing smile, not only because the task prompted by the system was completed, perhaps. He also longed for this scene of admiration, right? Everyone in the room was silent, and the Joshua on the stage appeared before the saint. The air froze for a few seconds, and then there was a sparse round of applause in the dining room, mostly from Gryffindor House, especially from Harry Weasley's small circle. Joshua Joestar. Of course, there is a price to be paid to the transfiguration, you all. What are you thinking? I have never seen such a bold, thick, big, face, bag, nothing, heaven, shame, person. Professor McGonagall's growl was comparable to the roar letter sent to Ron by Mrs. Reevesley, which Joshua had seen, and it was hard to imagine that an old woman over 70 could have such an astonishing roar. Joshua looked back with a wry smile and pressed his hands down in the hope that the lady would be discouraged. Well, Professor McGonagall, don't be angry, I don't think I'll be fired for this mistake, right? Or are you unwilling to accept me as a student? Professor McGonagall stared at him deadly, of course not. As a young wizard who has not learned even the most basic spells, you can be bold enough to say those words. Maybe you're really suited to be a Gryffindor. But the same. In the hall, you want to. Then I accept. Joshua hurriedly spoke, since you have already shown mercy, what can I do to fight? There's his rule system in the school and I don't want to break these things right now. But I wish I could go back to my house now, after all. There are already a lot of people waiting to eat, aren't they? Professor McGonagall looked back helplessly, hoping that old Principal Dang would give her some advice. However, Dumbledore didn't care that a newborn calf called him by his name, and the cloudy eyes behind the half-crescent lenses flashed with a kind gaze. He just smiled and nodded, signaling to hand over the handling to Professor McGonagall. Oh. Well, even if it's over, you go and take a seat at Gryffindor. But you give me a memory. Forget it today, tomorrow. After the official start of school, go to Mr. Filch in the evening, to be punished. For a week, is this considered that the head teacher dumped the stubborn child to the janitor for adjustment? Joshua shrugged subconsciously and found some near-bald skinny man at the classroom table behind him, the janitor who was watching Joshua with predator-looking prey eyes. Joshua didn't care, bowed slightly towards Filch, and then walked dashingly to his seat, which surprised the janitor. Could this little rabbit cub who looked like a prickly head be a good boy who knew how to be polite? But the gatekeeper's whims couldn't interfere with Joshua, and now he was sitting between Harry and Ron, receiving the praise the victor deserved. Hey! Buddy! You're so cool. I never imagined that I could make such a statement over there. A red-haired boy patted Joshua the shoulder. Then another boy who looked exactly like him also spoke. Oh, don't care about George, he always has this strange idea. By the way, my name is Fred, Ron has already told us about you. I think it's cool to be brought to school by Professor McGonagall. Then don't you think the same as me? It's weird. The first boy to speak, George, confronted his twin brother, and Fred was also overwhelmed and began an intimate brotherly interaction with him. Don't care, they are such people. Ron, who was sitting next to Joshua, touched his nose, and there were really two living brothers. Episode 39. There are two little wizards after Joshua, but compared to the huge fame of Harry Potter before and the performance art of Joshua's branch, those two little wizards did not receive much attention at all. Professor McGonagall hurriedly snapped her sorting hat over their heads, and then their sorting ceremony ended in the next second. The people sitting next to Joshua all looked quite friendly, and did not despise Joshua for what he had just said, and all of them wanted to squeeze to his side, of course, maybe for Harry's possibility. Guys, can you get back to your seat first? The sorting ceremony is over, and then it's time for the headmaster to speak. As an otaku, Joshua felt uncomfortable with being surrounded by people, and could only point ahead, where Professor McGonagall was picking up a three-legged stool and preparing to return the sorting hat to its original storage location. The old students naturally knew that Dumbledore's time was next, so they smiled goodbye to the new students and returned to their seats. When Professor McGonagall returned, Headmaster Albus Dumbledore stood up. The old man with silver and white hair was looking at the students with a smile on his face and stretching out his arms to them, as if nothing made him happier than seeing them gathered together. "Welcome," he said, "welcome to Hogwarts for a new school year. Before the banquet begins, I would like to say a few words. That is, stupid. Cry. Residue. Ring. Thank you all. I looked it up, There are currently two versions of this sentence on the internet. One is the semantic meaning of the Latin pronunciation that I first knew, may Merlin fool you. The other is that netizens guessed that a word corresponds to a house, symbolizing Dumbledore's message to the four houses, but this correspondence is too much, how can it be true? Of course, this may also be the reader's transitional interpretation of this sentence, just like Mr. Lu Sun's, good night. It can be interpreted as dissatisfaction with the darkness of the society of the time. What the hell is he talking about? How do I feel? Our principal is a little crazy? Harry Potter was a little incomprehensible to Dumbledore's speech, so he asked Percy, who was sitting across from him, hoping that the Weasley family master would help him a little. Crazy? Percy frowned, then shook his head and said, he's a genius. The best wizard in the world. But you're right, he's a little crazy. Harry and Joshua. Would you like some potatoes? Joshua watched with interest as food appeared on the empty plate in front of him, and since the country of Ing is a divided meal system, these foods are piled together, such as roast beef, roast chicken, pork chops, lamb chops, sausages, steaks, boiled potatoes, baked potatoes, potato chips, Yorkshire pudding, pea seedlings, carrots, gravy, ketchup, and several plates of mint hard candy. If students want to eat, they only need to put it on their plate. Perhaps after waiting too long in Hagrid's cabin in the afternoon, Joshua felt that he was now extremely hungry, and he didn't even notice a ghost floating around him while eating. By the time he was about the same as eating and drinking, the students had basically wiped out the contents of their plates. Wow. I just found out now, Joshua, do you eat so fast? Ron, who was chatting with the ghost, suddenly noticed that Joshua had pushed his plate aside, and not even a drop of grease could be seen on it. Joshua leaned back weakly in his chair and rubbed his slightly swollen belly with one hand. Of course, I even think it's a little slow. Ah yes, Harry. Huh? Is there something going on? Harry heard Joshua call out to himself, so he stopped eating and turned to look at Joshua. Harry, do you still eat that mint hard candy? I don't know why, this mint hard candy is actually the fastest consuming, and now there are only a few pieces on Harry's plate on the field. It's a bit greedy to say. But I love this mint hard candy. Harry blinked his eyes, as if considering whether to give it to him. However, after a few seconds, Harry handed Joshua the mint candy on his plate. Yes. Thank you. Joshua was delighted, and the mint hard candy was put in his mouth. Ario makes a cherry eating sound. Damn it. I don't know why I suddenly wanted to hit him. It always feels even stronger than when he pretended to be in front of him just now. Ron whispered to the people around him, drawing approval from a group of people. Episode 40. Old Principal Dang stood up, and the students had almost finished eating and drinking at this time, and they had the energy to listen to their speech. Oh, now that everyone is full and drunk, I want to say a few more words to everyone. At the beginning of the semester, I would like to make a few points to note to you. First-year students should note that all woods on campus are off-limits. Some of our older classmates also have to remember this. Dumbledore's shining gaze swept towards the Weasley twins. Besides, the administrator, Mr. Filch, also asked me to remind everyone not to do magic in the hallways between classes. The vetting of Quidditch players will take place during the second week of the semester. Students who are interested in joining the college team should contact Mrs. Hooch. Finally, I must tell everyone that those who do not want to suffer an accident, painful death, please do not enter the corridor on the right side of the fourth floor. Joshua clearly saw Dumbledore deliberately glance over to himself as he said this. Maybe for others this is a warning to the Weasley twins, but for Joshua, who knows the plot, this is clearly a psychological suggestion. He's not serious, is he? Harry asked Percy quietly. Is there really something dangerous there on the fourth floor? The headmaster should be serious, said Percy, frowning at Dumbledore. But strangely enough, wherever we were not allowed to go, he usually explained why. For example, there are many dangerous beasts in the woods, which everyone knows. I think he should at least make it clear to our prefect. Oh, you can pull it down. Percy. Maybe Dumbledore doesn't take you so-called The little prefect is in the eyes. The only ones who dared to speak to the new Gryffindor prefect were the Weasley twins, and Joshua vaguely remembered that this person was George. Yes, maybe he only told the teachers and the heads of the male and female student unions important news. You prefect. Probably not qualified at all. Fred on the other side picked up the conversation, and it seemed that the two of them were very unhappy with Percy's ostentation of his position. You too. Percy slapped the table angrily. If it's not the opening dinner, you're going to be sent to Mr. Filch by me for teasing the prefect. Harry didn't know what to say on the side, so he had to cast his gaze on Joshua for help, but when he turned his head, he found that his classmate next to him was carrying a cup of thick peach juice, watching the Weasleys bustle while sipping. Roar, distribute in the past, it's not that I haven't been. George shrugged his shoulders very easily, indicating that this was nothing to himself. Fred nodded approvingly. I don't care. Where can we both go to be the companion of poor Joshua, so that he won't become lonely during this first week of school? Huh? Stay with me? No need. Joshua took a deep breath, sucked the last bit of juice in the quilt, saw that the two of them changed the topic to their own, and quickly waved their hands to refuse. Isn't it just to help that Mr. Filch or something? What's going on here? Joshua's words made the old students around him stunned for a long time, and finally Percy patted Joshua's shoulder, looking a little helpless. I think it's better to tell you, it's better. In our school, Mr. Filch is the second most unpopular person. So Joshua is miserable? Harry asked with interest, and who was the first person? Percy's face became even more embarrassed, and he whispered to the freshmen gathered in their circle, although this is a little bad for me to say as a prefect. But watch out for Snape, the potions teacher, he's the head of Slytherin, and he's not used to our Gryffindors. Harry subconsciously touched his forehead. I think there is a little. When he looked at me, my scars. I don't know why it hurts dully. Ron also said, yes. I remember Dad not saying that Snape taught him. No one took the stubble, and the small circle suddenly became silent. Harry was a little anxious. Say. What's going on? I'm so uncomfortable with you guys who are so appetizing.